Brian Cohen says, Riskrunner, Battle Mantle, Elemental Charge, Elemental Ordnance, and Firepower ×3. This energy, I like it, genuinely love the idea, passionately loathe most elemental mods. Elemental Charge is about as useful as flavored bleach, so I took it off and stuffed it in the dumpster, which is where most of the well mods belong. Orbs of Power are way more common, significantly more efficient with taking charge. Basically what that translates to is... Finally got monetization running again, so I'm getting real ballsy with the Star Wars clips. That's right, kids, we're finally talking about the first of several builds for the Mantle of Battle Harmony, which is basically just the overly successful son of Nazaryk's Sin. I don't care what you say, that's what it is. The general mechanic remains the same between the two. Elemental weapon kills charge ability energy, with the main difference between the two being what ability receives said energy and what element they utilize. Let's take a look at the exotic real quick, and then we'll dive headfirst into the concrete. Kills with elemental weapons that match your subclass element grant extra super energy. Once your super is full, each kill gives a small buff called Absorption Cells, which boosts the damage of any elemental weapon that matches your subclass. In layman's terms, arc subclass, arc weapon. If they don't match, you're just wasting your time and energy. So let's scoot on over to the skill trees and have a gander at the subclass in question. We're going to be doing some self-damage to make this work, but we'll talk more about that later. For now, you absolutely need a healing rift, and you absolutely need a storm grenade. If you know how Riskrunner works, then you already know where I'm going with this. Middle tree Stormcaller, Chaos Reach to be specific. We all know how it works. You press Q to systematically rip everything in front of you apart on a molecular level. Press Q again to cancel it early. That's kindergarten stuff. We're here for the meat, and boy do we have a prime cut steak here. Ball Lightning. Pulse Wave, Ionic Trace. The first two are only here for show. Ionic Trace is the one that matters. That's because every kill has a chance to create, you'll never guess, an Ionic Trace that'll dance around the room. Grab it and it restores ability energy for seemingly everything. They're extremely common, and as a result, it functions as a supplement to all the mods and weapons that we're going to be using. Speaking of weapons, let's slide on over and take a look at the gun of choice for this one. Riskrunner. Getting shot by it is a lot like sticking a fork in a light socket. It hurts. A lot. Arc Conductor increases damage and resists incoming arc damage, and any kills while the buff is active will increase its duration. It's an absolute monster. This is some nightmare fuel right here, even if it doesn't look like it. It also has a secondary perk called Superconductor. This causes all rounds fired while Arc Conductor is active to potentially arc and chain to other targets near the one that you're shooting at, while simultaneously returning any rounds that do so back into the magazine. It's really, really good. I could talk about it all day, but we've got other fish to fry, so let's take a look at some mods. This was cobbled together using last season's and this season's armor, so I had to get a little creative this time. So let's take a gander here real quick. Starting with the helm, I've got SMG Ammo Finder, Dynamo, which is extremely important, and lastly, Elemental Armaments. That will make Riskrunner spawn wells, which are crucial to the build itself. Dynamo gives a bit of super energy when casting a rift near a group of targets, and you'll be doing that way more often than you think, so bring it. You won't regret it. As for gauntlets, we've got Anti-Barrier Sniper and Font of Wisdom. You'll need a set of gauntlets from the current season to slot Elemental Well mods, so think long and hard before masterworking old armors. As for chest armor and greaves, you'll need a stack of firepower on each. Ionic Traces will make up for the missing stack of firepower, believe me. I've also got SMG Scav on my greaves as well, along with Innervation. If you've got the catalyst for Riskrunner, you'll want that. Orbs of Light restore bits of grenade energy, and they'll be scattered everywhere from all the death and destruction that follows you in your wake. Lastly, for your bond, you'll need surge detonators for the overload champs, distribution for the energy return on rift casting, and taking charge, which is only there to fuel firepower. For kinetic and heavy weapons, that's all on you. I'll give my recommendations, but I don't want to hear any crying in the comments section. I always get yelled at and it makes me sad. For anti-barrier, I've got a Long Shadow. It's not the greatest sniper in the game, but it serves its purpose well for me specifically. Any sniper will do. This is just the one that I like the most. Honestly, this is here specifically for the barriers. The build itself is meant for close-range combat. Anything with an SMG as its main source of damage is typically meant for getting up close and personal, but you can play it whichever way you feel most comfortable with. I try to conserve my rounds for the champion specifically, but if you're a better shot than me, then fire away and never look back. As for heavy weapons, rockets are seemingly the new quote-unquote, thing as of late, so I'd recommend something like a Sub-Zero Salvo, something that matches with the subclass elements so it works works with Battle Harmony. Other than that, it's mostly one of those to-be-determined type deals, mostly because enemy shields change from sector to sector and match game is almost always on. Lastly, in case anyone was wondering for whatever reason, here is my stat line. Relatively healthy with a hefty balance between discipline and intellect, just the way that I like it. So here's how this works. You remember that self-damage thing I mentioned earlier? Well, this is where it comes in handy. You've got a healing rift and a storm grenade for one reason only. The storm grenade will damage you and activate arc conductor. Healing rift restores all that lost health while you sit at a vantage point and chain arc damage with Riskrunner. Especially in areas with large amounts of fallen or arc damage in general, this is extremely useful. Likely way more useful than how I'm selling it to be right now. I suggest a storm grenade because the pulse grenade will damage you, but it'll only proc arc conductor for 3 seconds. A storm grenade procs it for 5. Or at the very least, that's what I've seen in all of my recordings. So you can take either one of them, but again, I will always stand by using the storm grenade because I'd much rather proc the buff for those extra 2 seconds. It's more a matter of personal preference, honestly, so snag whichever feels right for you. Either of them will suffice. It's risky, quote unquote, but it's well worth it. I feel physically sick for making that joke. Feel free to give me a good roast in the comments, I deserve it. As your murder spree continues and the body count grows, you'll start seeing a lot of orbs, wells, and ionic traces. All of these, in one way or another, are going to fill up your ability energy, so let's start with firepower. Firepower restores grenade energy every time you throw a grenade, assuming you have a charge of light for the mod to consume. Riskrunner, with the catalyst, will generate a lot of those, so you'll be throwing lots of grenades. Typically, you'll be throwing them at your feet, but occasionally you'll stuff them down a champion's throat too. There's no need to be heavily conservative with them. There's so much energy regen potential that it really doesn't matter in various different combat scenarios. Riskrunner will also generate elemental wells, which will both restore energy to all of your abilities and give you an intellect buff that lasts for 30 seconds. Can confirm this does stack with Battle Harmony. This means that Chaos Reach is ready to cast significantly more often than it would normally be, which in turn means that you can cast indiscriminately, not having to worry about where your energy is going. It makes a very large noticeable difference, trust me. Again, the sniper is for the barrier champions. They're nowhere near the threat that they used to be, but they still can cause problems. The rocket is there mostly for burst damage against champions, specifically the overloading pricks. As previously discussed on this channel, overload champions can eat sand and choke for all I care, which is why we've also got surge detonators and all these grenade recharge mods. Because of all the bad things in this game, they are the absolute worst. If I could recommend a sword in good confidence, I would, but Fallen Guillotine got a huge nerf, and even though it's still a viable source of damage, I can safely say that trying to use it specifically here got me killed more often than not. All in all, this is a close-range build meant for a balance between increased super regeneration and chain damage, dominating close quarters encounters by preventing enemies from getting any closer to you than they already are. Mob crowds are easily disposed of when chain lightning is melting everything in a matter of seconds. But anyway, kids, that about sums up this entire build here. I've got 2 more Battle Harmony builds hitting the channel in the next week, maybe 2. Putting these together is an extremely large amount of work, so upload delays are extremely common at this point. I've apologized for that 1,000 times, and I'll apologize for it 1,000 more. I don't release anything until it meets a certain standard that I have set for myself, and if that means delays, then delayed it will be. Also, I've got a brand new Discord. You should join it. Links in the description. That's where my new cell is, which is where I'll be if anyone needs me.